Hey Kristen, what in the world happened? Nicholas finally arrived at my hospital room after I had a miscarriage. He glanced my way and muttered, again, clicking his tongue in irritation. Then, upon seeing my brother who had rushed over, he said, "And who is this guy? Don't tell me, you brought another man here?" However, my brother calmly responded, "Hey, there's been a woman with long, blood-soaked curly hair trying to hug you from behind since earlier. Do you know her by any chance?" "What are you talking about?" Nicholas looked at my brother with a startled expression. My brother pointed at Nicholas and continued, "That's the person I'm talking about. She's wearing a big peridot ring on her right ring finger." At that moment, Nicholas started to shiver violently. "Ugh!" He groaned at my brother's words and hurriedly fled the room. "My name is Kristen Rodriguez, I'm 29 years old. I live with my husband Nicholas. And I'm working with no children. We are a couple who eloped. It was 5 years ago. I was just 24, in my second year of employment, and couldn't attend company social gatherings due to my parents' policies. The following year, such gatherings were less frequent due to the times, but back then, it was common for the younger employees to go out and have fun. Our family was strict about attending these gatherings, essentially making them off-limits unless absolutely necessary. I always felt out of place as my colleagues would comment on my poor socializing. During one rare outing that I sneaked away to a mixer, I met my current husband Nicholas. He was a smartly dressed salesperson 6 years older than me. He was introduced as a hard-working individual by other attendees. That day, he was considerate towards me, a newcomer to such gatherings. He helped me catch up with conversations, discreetly stopped others from pressuring me to drink, and even rescued me from an unwelcome after-party, taking me to a taxi. His demeanor back then was very gentlemanly. I was instantly attracted to him. Eventually, we started meeting privately and officially became a couple. 6 months later, he proposed. I was thrilled and immediately said yes. However, my family was not so accommodating. My family has been wealthy for generations, with my father being a senior executive at a major local company. My parents always said they would scrutinize my partner themselves, and they had been strict about relationships throughout my school years. In hindsight, my naivety in judging people was probably clear to my parents and even to my only brother, Andrew. Andrew always used to say to me, "I won't stop you from seeing whoever you like, unlike Dad and the others, but at least let me meet him first." My brother, 10 years older than me, was the most dependable person I knew. Even so, I hesitated to introduce Nicholas to him at that time. I was afraid of Andrew's piercing gaze that seemed to see right through everything. Defying our parents and avoiding Andrew's sad looks, Nicholas and I ended up eloping. I first moved into his condo, and because of that, he started facing harassment from his boss at the company where he worked at the time. My father's company was a client of his. Perhaps we were too carefree back then. We decided to quit our jobs and move to a different state together. We both decided, and then we quit our jobs and moved to another state. And there, we got married. Looking back, that might have been the happiest time for us. Because once we moved, Nicholas's attitude towards me gradually began to change. The condo we moved into was older, cheaper, and smaller than where he had lived before. Once we started living there, Nicholas suddenly told me, "I'm gonna have to work harder than ever before. So you're gonna have to take care of all the household chores." "All right, then I'll just..." I began, but Nicholas cut me off. "But of course, you should keep working full-time like before." He said it as if it were obvious. "Your job is much easier than mine, right? It's only natural you do the housework too." I couldn't respond to Nicholas. Indeed, my earnings were nowhere near his. After moving, Nicholas found another job in sales, and I managed to get re-employed as well. But it was quite different from the cushy job I had when we were financially supported by my family. The salary was lower, and the conditions were far from good. The one difference was that most of my colleagues at the new job were women about a decade older than me, and they took more care of me than those at my previous company. On my way home, I'd do the shopping and had to get used to doing all the household chores properly. In the condo where I first moved in with him, Nicholas had been particular about the interior and never let me touch the cleaning. And he was good at cooking, often having meals ready while I was asleep. However, after we moved, he stopped doing that altogether and left everything to me, harshly criticizing how I did things. "Hey! There's dust accumulating here." "I'm sorry, I didn't notice. It was the same last time. Don't think someone else is always going to take care of it for you." All I could do was nod in agreement. At that time, I thought he was right. Indeed, at my family home, I knew how to cook, clean, and do laundry, but I didn't have to do much of it. Suddenly, I had to do everything, not just for myself but for him too. And if I didn't meet his standards, he would point it out harshly, making it a relentless and exhausting life. Moreover, even when I was tired and wanted to sleep, he would insist on maintaining our marital relations. Even though I told him I was tired, Nicholas just wouldn't listen. Gradually, his dissatisfaction with my complaints seemed to increase, and he started going out at night more frequently. Back then, I always thought this was all my fault. After all, he had been a top salesperson at a good company, and it was all because of me that he had to move out of his route and into a cramped condo. That's why I felt I had to give it my all with him. I truly believed that. And so, I pushed myself harder at work and took housekeeping more seriously, waiting for my often absent husband to come home. Maybe around the second year of our marriage, I got pregnant. But I miscarried before I even realized I was pregnant. Nicholas was surprised by this, called an ambulance immediately, and seemed worried as he stayed by my side for a while. At that moment, I thought Nicholas's affection for me had returned. But perhaps it was just an illusion. When I was discharged from the hospital and went back to work, Nicholas started dipping into our joint savings. I'm not sure when I noticed it. One day, when I went to update our bank book, I saw that the balance was rapidly decreasing. "What have you been spending money on lately?" I asked, timidly showing him the bank account. "That's none of your business, isn't it? Do you have a problem with what I do?" "But this bank book is our joint asset. We might need to suddenly go to the hospital like last time, and that applies to you too." "Yeah, that's true. But that was because you miscarried on your own." When I heard those words, I was momentarily baffled. "What are you saying?" "It was a miscarriage. Our child was lost." "But that was something your body did on its own, wasn't it?" I was at a loss for words. "And we can always have more kids in the future. Stop talking about such depressing things." With that, he went back to his usual routine. One day, I asked myself, no, the child we could have had then couldn't be replaced by anyone else. Even if we had another, it would be a different child. For the first time, I started to feel a sense of distrust towards Nicholas. 2 more years passed, and I was pregnant again. This time, I was determined to protect this life. I scaled back on work and planned to take maternity leave soon. However, I couldn't find the right time to discuss my pregnancy. Because Nicholas was often away on business trips during that period. But I knew that was a lie. When I called his company to ask about his business trip destination, that's when it happened. "A business trip?" Nicholas's boss asked me with a puzzled voice. "He wasn't on a business trip. I heard he took a personal day for a family event back home. Didn't you know?" "Oh, no, I must have remembered wrong. Could you please not tell him I asked? It was a misunderstanding on my part." After hanging up the phone, I felt all my strength drain away. What a thing to say. And now that I knew he wasn't on a business trip, I had to keep up appearances in the little conversation that continued. If it seemed like I knew he had lied to the company, Nicholas could get reprimanded, which I could see happening. If it became apparent that I had lied to the company, it was clear that Nicholas would be reprimanded. If that happened, he would blame me, and there was a real risk he might become angry and resort to violence. I couldn't let that happen. At that time, I was determined to avoid such a situation at all costs. If he did that, it could endanger the life of our second child, who we were fortunate enough to conceive. So, I kept silent. Eventually, when the morning sickness became severe, I finally told Nicholas about the pregnancy. His response was, "Great, another mouth to feed." Despite my growing distrust, I couldn't believe those words. I thought those words were impossible. No way. No, it's not that. I wanted to believe they were impossible. By this time, I already knew that our joint bank account was nearly empty. After our first child was lost, I had been saving up again to cover the costs for the next childbirth from this account. However, perhaps due to growing distrust, I had been slowly saving money in a separate account as well. When I saw that the joint account was almost empty, I resolved to pay with my own funds. Of course, I kept this a secret from Nicholas. Because if he found out, he would immediately demand it and extort the money from me, that much was clear. Surprisingly, the one place I could breathe was at work. As the days went on, more colleagues, especially older women, would say, "You look pale, are you okay, or you seem tired?" Initially, I insisted I was fine and continued working. I've been at this company for over 4 years now, and it doesn't pay much, but I have a good relationship with my colleagues, and it's a comfortable place to work. That's why I've stayed longer than I did at my first job. Honestly, the people around me were happier about this pregnancy than Nicholas was. That's because I had told my female colleagues about my previous miscarriage. Many of the older colleagues had continued working through their younger years and had shifted to part-time work after pregnancy and childbirth. This meant they all understood my situation quite well. So they probably sensed the reason I was enduring severe morning sickness and still working might be because I was afraid of what my husband might do if I didn't. Eventually, the company told me that since systems were in place to handle such situations, I should really take a break if I was struggling. And that's how I was more or less forced to take a leave from work. "Get some rest and then come back to work with us," they all said. Moved by their warmth, I teared up. Then, as I was about to leave, exhausted, I collapsed right there. At that time, I lost consciousness instantly and didn't realize it, but it seems I had a severe hemorrhage right there. I later learned that an ambulance was called immediately, and I was taken to the hospital. When I regained consciousness in the hospital room, I was shocked to see how much my belly had flattened. I couldn't understand what had happened right away. But as the reality slowly dawned on me, I couldn't help but bury my face in the pillow and sob quietly. Then I grabbed my phone from the bag within reach and impulsively called home. After a few rings, I realized what I was doing and quickly hung up, but a call came right back. Unable to move due to my condition, all I could do was lower the volume. Ignoring it wasn't an option. I switched to call mode and answered quietly, "Hello? Kristen?" It was Andrew's familiar voice. "I recognized it was your mobile number, but you hung up so quickly. What's going on?" Through tears, I slowly told Andrew on the other end of the phone that I had lost the second child. Andrew just listened in silence. When I calmed down a bit, he spoke slowly. "Sounds like you've had a tough time." Andrew was still the kind person he always was. "Where are you now?" "Sorry, I'm at the hospital. I can't move. I'm on the bed." "Got it. I guess a phone call isn't good then. I'll come right over." "Which hospital are you at? Tell me?" I told him the name of the hospital, which I had learned from a nurse when I woke up. I also realized that I was relatively close by in a neighboring county. "Hold on for a bit. I'll be there soon." Andrew's voice, even after 5 years, still brought me comfort. I wondered how he was doing now. Since we hadn't been in touch, if he had gotten married and had a wife, would I be intruding? These thoughts kept spinning in my head. And a few hours later, Andrew came to my hospital room. It seemed to be a large room, but there was hardly anyone else around. So when Andrew entered, I could barely sit up but managed to cry out to him. "What in the world happened?" Then I began to recount everything that had led up to this moment, sobbing through the story. Especially this pregnancy, which I had been extra careful with because of the previous one. Maybe I let my guard down feeling relieved that I could take a break, or maybe it was just the accumulation of fatigue. In any case, my body might have been signaling its limits. As much as to say that the life that was supposed to be there could no longer stay. "You've been through a lot," Andrew said as he stroked my hair. "By the way, how's he doing? Hasn't he contacted you yet?" I shook my head no. "I heard from the hospital staff that they contacted his office. So I've been waiting, but he hasn't shown up yet. But you know, I'm kind of, well, actually pretty angry." I started to apologize, but Andrew cut me off. Then my brother said, "No, that's not it. It's that you didn't show him to me first." "Just that." I began to reply when the door to the hospital room opened again. "Hey Kristen, what in the world happened?" It was Nicholas. He glanced at me and muttered, again, clicking his tongue in annoyance. "And who is this? Don't tell me, you brought a man here?" "That's not it. Nicholas, this is my brother," I started to say. "Hey." Andrew stared intently at Nicholas, slightly furrowing his brow. "What? You got something to say to me?" "No," Andrew narrowed his eyes and calmly said, "There's a woman with long, blood-soaked curly hair trying to hug you from behind. Do you know her?" "What are you talking about?" Nicholas looked startled at Andrew. Andrew pointed at Nicholas and said, "That's the person. She's wearing a big peridot ring on her right ring finger." Andrew's tone was light, as if he was discussing the weather. At that moment, Nicholas began to tremble violently. Finally, he must have understood what was being said to him. "What are you talking about?" Nicholas asked loudly, without regard for the setting. "Please keep it down. This is a hospital. And I'm just saying what I saw. Oh, the hair's gotten wet and the curls are tighter. She looks a bit younger than Kristen, maybe a college student?" "So, what exactly?" "So, that woman is clinging to your neck just like this, her bright red lips curled into a smile." My brother explained, mimicking the gesture he saw, and Nicholas shuddered in response. "No, what are you saying? That's nonsense." "I'm just telling you what I see. I don't know and don't care who she might be to you." "Ugh." Nicholas groaned at Andrew's words and hurriedly left the room. "What did you see again, Andrew?" "Yeah, well, just like I said. But, let me go make a call outside. Just wait here a moment." Andrew left the room. So that's what Andrew saw. I sighed deeply. The reason I didn't want to introduce Nicholas to my brother before we got married might be due to my brother's nature, perhaps his psychic sensitivity. It was because of that trait of his. It's always been like that. My brother could always find things I'd lost quickly. He would sense if something unpleasant was lingering around me, and he even recognized when I was being isolated at school. He complained about needing sunglasses whenever we went near cemeteries for visits or other reasons. That was normal for me back then. But that very reason made me afraid of what he might say if he saw Nicholas, especially since my entire family was against him. Andrew sees through everything. That's why I might as well say I ran to a place beyond his gaze. Of course, that wasn't the only reason. Eventually, Andrew returned. "Sorry to keep you waiting. Where did you call?" "Well, we can talk about that later." Then, with a serious look, Andrew asked, "Do you really plan to continue with him?" I stayed silent. I just kept gripping the blanket over and over. "It's tough, isn't it? Why don't you come back home?" "But then, what about your place, Andrew?" If I were to go back, it would be to my parents' house. And if Andrew were to inherit the house and if he were married, wouldn't I be an unwelcome sister-in-law? "Yeah, I'm still single." "Really? You're still single?" "Yeah, with this condition, it's tough finding a woman without any hidden aspects. Having the ability to see such things isn't always convenient." "When I walked into this room, I could immediately tell you weren't happy. There was a dark cloud around you. It reminded me of the time you were wrongly suspected and avoided by classmates." It's similar to that bad aura surrounding you now. You don't look happy at all. Tears naturally started falling from my eyes again. I nodded heavily. Yeah. I can't stand it anymore. I'm going to divorce him. I thought maybe if we had a child it would be okay, but even if we did, it would have been pointless with the way things were. That's right. Probably, the child you were carrying was trying to tell you something, that this situation isn't right. So, come back home soon. I'll take care of things with him. Take care of things? As I wiped my tears and tilted my head, Andrew confidently said, "You'll see soon enough." After I was discharged, I went straight back to my parents' house. They seemed very surprised to see me after a long time. They might have wanted to scold me for eloping suddenly, but more than that, they were likely distressed by how thin and worn out I appeared. "You've really been through a lot," my mother said as she hugged me. My father also added, "You've certainly learned a lot about life." Since I needed to rest for a while, I submitted a request for a long-term leave at work. I even hinted that I might resign. Nicholas may have understood the possibility of divorce when he witnessed my second miscarriage firsthand. "Your company seems to have had some good people," Andrew noted as he observed my responses. Yes, that was the only place where I felt at peace. I realized I had never been able to relax at home. Then a few days later, Nicholas showed up at my parents' house. "Sorry, but I know Kristen is there. Please let her come out." My mother, who answered him first, firmly said, "We cannot let Kristen come out to you." Then she added, "However, we do have something to discuss with you." "And what might that be?" Nicholas took the bait. "To get straight to the point, we ask that you divorce Kristen." "Is that Kristen's wish?" "Yes, it is. She currently does not want to see you." While my mother spoke firmly, Nicholas walked into the drawing room as directed. I was listening from the next room. Nicholas sat heavily on the sofa in the drawing room, looking around nervously. "Couldn't take the lifestyle of a well-to-do lady, could she?" Nicholas began to slander me in front of my mother. "It's improper. To just abandon her husband and run back to her parents' house over this. To think she was raised to be such a wife." My mother listened silently until a knock from behind the door prompted a yes in response. Then Andrew appeared. "Your turn, Andrew." "Yeah, leave the rest to me." At Andrew's entrance, Nicholas let out a small gasp. "You?" "Yeah, haven't seen you since that time at the hospital." Nicholas tried to rise. But he couldn't. As he tried to stand up, Nicholas was forcefully held down by a strong grip on his shoulder. Just as my brother entered the room, security from our family, who had been stationed on the opposite side, near the door Nicholas came through, also made their presence known. Ours is a family of considerable standing, where it's fair to say staff are always on standby. As my mother stepped aside, my brother took a seat in front of Nicholas and began to speak. "Well, I have quite a few things I'd like to ask you." "What are you talking about?" My brother glanced at Nicholas, who was being restrained, and pointed to his side. "Yeah, today, there's a woman who's been hugging you from the side." "What are you talking about?" "Do you know this person?" Andrew then took out a photo of a woman and placed several copies on the table in front of Nicholas. He gasped again. "Why do you have that?" Nicholas started but then stopped himself. "I don't know this woman." And he pretended as if he didn't know. "You don't know her?" "But you see, whether it's behind or beside you, I can see this lady's arms slowly tightening around your neck. You're totally unaware of it, aren't you?" "No, what are you even saying to me?" "Well, let's just say I tend to see things that others don't. But that alone isn't enough to prove you did anything to her. That's why I had our guys look into whether anyone knew this person." He then showed a sketch he had drawn of the woman. Andrew can draw fairly well, which comes in handy when he needs to explain things he sees that are invisible to others. The sketch I saw was of a long-haired, blood-soaked woman with a resentful yet somehow smiling expression, entwined around Nicholas. There's more. When Andrew explained that her hair was wet, I asked what he meant, and he casually mentioned, "Well, probably this person isn't in this world anymore. To Andrew, seeing such things has been a part of his life since birth, so he discussed it matter-of-factly. As a child, this ability caused him trouble, but now he seems to accept it as just another part of who he is. Andrew continued to Nicholas. I found out that this person has been missing. Isn't that right? I don't know her, I told you. And about this missing person. Andrew ignored Nicholas's protests and continued. I had it checked out. Here's the investigation report. I also saw the report. After seeing the woman in the hospital, Andrew quickly contacted our family lawyer, who then reached out to the police. Of course, we didn't mention that Andrew can see people who are not visible to others. It was more about asking if they had any information because we think we know someone who might fit the description of a current situation. The police involvement might also relate to the influence our family has in this area. It turns out that the woman suddenly disappeared last year, and her family had filed a missing persons report. Incidentally, she lived near the condo we used to live in the neighboring county. I thought maybe Nicholas started seeing her during the days he didn't come home, using the savings we had built up. So maybe that person? I asked Andrew hesitantly when I heard the results of the investigation. Yeah, probably, Andrew replied ambiguously. And probably now, he was thinking of confronting Nicholas about it. From about the year before last, you started spending more and going on trips frequently, didn't you? That's strictly our personal business. It has nothing to do with you. It does matter. My sister saved up that money, and you ended up spending it on that woman, right? Nicholas seemed increasingly irritated by Andrew's calm demeanor. That's a matter between spouses. Well, that includes why we want you to divorce Kristen now. No, that would be inconvenient for me. Nicholas flatly refused. Why? I guess I know, because it would mean one less breadwinner, right? Nicholas clicked his tongue again. After a moment of thought, he said, I might agree to the divorce, but how about you give me something in return, as he made a circle with his fingers. What, are you asking for money to agree to the divorce? Well, yes. You guys have been against it all along, haven't you? Kristen couldn't return home because of that. I didn't mind divorcing, but I felt bad for making her homeless, so I stayed married to her. Hearing this, I almost felt sick. While I had been quietly waiting for him, all this time he thought this way. Basically, you came uninvited. Because of that, I even had to change my job. Ever since, things have only gotten worse. Don't you think I deserve something for all the trouble you've caused? Well, maybe, if you were a decent person. What did you say? Nicholas started to get up, but Andrew restrained him by the shoulders, preventing him from standing. I told you I had it investigated, right? Then Andrew turned towards the door. That's when the police officers, who had been waiting, came into view. What? Why are the police here? Didn't I tell you I had it investigated? You're a bit careless. But maybe it's better if you're caught here. Otherwise, that woman's arm will keep tightening around your neck, along with her hair, and it will end up strangling you. She looks quite furious, you know. What do you mean by that? Andrew looked sideways and nodded several times, then said, Oh, so this peridot ring is a fake. She realized that during a trip and confronted you about it, and you lost your temper. Shut up. Whether it was real or fake, you were satisfied when it happened. Nicholas inadvertently confessed. Caught in his own words, the waiting police officers stepped forward, holding out their badges. We need to ask you about the disappearance and possible unlawful disposal of Shannon Brown. We'll need you to come to the station. The security let go of Nicholas, and he was handed over to the police. I finally felt like I could breathe. Then, I slowly walked into the room. Hey, Kristen! Were you listening all this time? I won't allow a divorce. It doesn't matter what you say, I've already decided. After all, you never took seriously the fact that I lost our child. Both times, even the second miscarriage, Nicholas only glanced briefly at my sunken belly. I truly regret choosing you. Nicholas choked on his words. What was I even doing? I wasted my time, energy, and money on someone like you. Ridiculous. Seemingly surprised by my outspokenness, Nicholas gaped at me. Goodbye. We won't meet again. I'll let the lawyers handle everything from here. Wait, Kristen, hey! Let's go, please. Nicholas still seemed to want to say something, but the police ushered him away. Following the police interrogation, Nicholas confessed. The missing Shannon Brown was a student living nearby. The younger woman, who met Nicholas through a sugar daddy arrangement, apparently wanted to marry him. She had been pressing for a divorce between us. Nicholas probably still saw me as a financial resource. His ultimate goal during this latest incident at my parents' home might have been to extort money by using the divorce as leverage. However, for Nicholas, Shannon Brown was nothing more than a fling, without any further use. During a trip to the mountains, they argued about a fake ring, and when he forcefully pushed her away, she fell and severely hit her head. It might have just been an accident, but what Nicholas did next was not. He dragged Shannon to the edge of a cliff and pushed her off. Because the mountain was outside the usual search areas, Shannon's whereabouts became unknown, complicating the search efforts. Later, based on Nicholas's statements, Shannon was discovered buried under grass near a spring in the mountains. Nicholas was arrested again, and it was certain he would serve a long sentence. Through my lawyer, I managed to get Nicholas to sign the divorce papers, and I was finally free. I'll be going now. Take care. Do your best. Encouraged by my mother's voice, I took my first step towards a new job. For a while, I completely quit the company I had been working at to rest my mind and body, and returned to my parents' home. Once I felt more stable physically and emotionally, I started looking for a new job. The 5 years of living might have toughened me up a bit, given my sheltered upbringing. I'd like to think I've become more resilient than during my initial office life. But for now, I think I'm done with marriage. Especially considering the fact that I've lost 2 pregnancies. For now, I want to stay away from marriage and pregnancy. Andrew is waiting for the shadows around me to clear and for a peaceful atmosphere to return. I don't know what the future holds, but this time, I want to live while taking good care of myself and those around me.